What's up, everybody, and welcome to the Press X Podcast, episode 149, your weekly podcast for gaming news and opinions coming at you each and every Monday. I'm Kevin McManus. With me, Nick Hassell.
The clock's ticking.
It is. We have one more week until episode 150, which is going to be our last weekly podcast episode. I keep saying it. We're still going to be doing different podcast videos and things. We're just not going to be doing the weekly news episodes and things anymore. Still going to
no more news ever.
Yeah, news is canceled. Still going to be videos on the channel, keeping all that stuff alive. You'll still see us.
After that Xbox event, I never want to see news ever again.
that is very true. So anyway, that is going to be next week. I guess we can tease a little bit what we're going to be doing for it since we have it mostly blocked out. It should, if all goes according to the plan, be you, me, and Kellen.
Yeah.
People have been on the most episodes of this.
The pillars, I guess?
Yes. Yeah. Going to be starring in that episode. And we are going to be doing something that I've talked about doing and teased about doing before when we were doing these top 10 lists. We're going to be doing top 10 favorite games of all time with, some asterisks and things for how we.
This is really hard.
Yeah, it's very difficult. So that's what's going to be the main topic of that. But we're going to have we're still going to talk about some news things, and there's going to be some surprises and stuff like that. So it'll be good. All that happening next Monday. So be sure to check that out. With that said, this week we're going to be doing another top 10 list. Mm-hmm. It's going to be our top 10 PlayStation games. This interesting because usually we film these and kind of put them in the holidays and things like that. This time we know what week this is going to be on. Mm-hmm. So I wanted to do something a little more topical with this one. And we'll do our top 10 lists as we normally do. We each pick 10 games. We do a point system where our 10th game is worth 1 point, our one game is worth 10 points, our number one game is worth 10 points, everything in between. We tally them up and we break tiebreakers and stuff. But I have a question for you, which is, on our finished list, how many games do you think are going to be available on the PlayStation Classic? That got announced. So I have the list for the PlayStation Classic. I'll read it.
Combined?
Our top 10 list.
I know it pretty fresh.
Yeah, so Battle Arena Toshinden, Cool Borders 2, Destruction Derby, Final Fantasy VII, Grand Theft Auto, Intelligent Cube, Jumping Flash, Metal Gear Solid, Mr. Driller, Oddworld Abe's Odyssey, Rayman, Resident Evil Director's Cut, Persona, Ridge Racer Type 4, Super Puzzle Fighter 2 Turbo, Siphon Filter, Tekken 3, Tom Clancy's Rainbow Six, Twisted Metal, and Wild Arms. Which, by the way, I think I got one game right when I did my list of what I thought was going to be on it.
I barely even got one series, right?
Yeah. So, of that list, how many do you think are going to be in our top 10?
2. If even.
I agree. I think it's only going to be 2.
Okay.
I don't think that list is terrible.
Yeah.
But it seems like they were trying to stick to classics, almost like PlayStation Origin.
Well,
doing
my big thing with it is you're not stealing Nintendo's thunder from the remake system. The remakes, you're not taking away anything from them with this list.
Well, that's true. It's just so strange. Sony owns so many games, first-party games, and there's not that many first-party games on there. They could have thrown a lot more at it. I'm not mad about it. I still have my pre-order, and I'm excited to play quite a handful of games on the list. I think the Japanese list is way better.
Sure.
It has Armored Core and Parasite Eve and Ark the Lad and stuff like that. I'd much rather have the Japanese list, and I'm hoping it's going to be hackable, and you'll just be able to put whatever you want on it. But with that said, that list was surprising to me. I was like,
that's one word for it.
But it had Metal Gear and it had Persona, and I was like, okay, I guess I'll get it.
Sure,
I guess that's fine. It's got save states and stuff, so that should help with some of the games. But we'll see how it goes. Like I said,
it was one heavy hitter and a bunch of tickles.
Yeah.
I wouldn't even call them jabs. It was just. Yeah, it was something for sure.
Going back into the rules for our top 10 PlayStation list here, one per franchise, which is actually relevant in this one. Sometimes, usually most relevant for Nintendo. I think it's relevant for the PlayStation 1. and it had to debut on the system,
Yeah.
which isn't as relevant, but
Yeah, it was basically like the middle ground of games where a lot of things maybe came in arcade, and that was still the era of maybe it just released in Japan, maybe it just did this and whatever. But we're past that point now, and most all of these games, unless it was just like an arcade spin-off or something like that, originated here. So, and it's kind of nice that we ended on PS1 because anything really past this, I don't know, it gets a little bit too old. Like, no one really cares about our like top 10 SNES games or anything. So.
Well, I think people do care, but I also think that there's this weird like protection over the game. So like everybody's like, well, it's Super Metroid and it's Super Mario World. Like that list is done, and I still don't mind like making that list in the future or anything, giving our opinions on it. But I feel like people are more defensive about those choices than they are.
That is the
about-
older people too, usually. Stuck in our ways.
than they are about the PlayStation 1
Yeah.
games or the Dreamcast.
But I thought this was a nice landing spot.
I
We
agree.
didn't really schedule it this way, but it just kind of happened, and
it did.
I'm fine with it.
I'm fine with it as well. With that said, we can hop into our list. Now, I remember from last time I let you go first, and then I realized why I don't do that. And it's because I need to tally stuff during your last game.
Because I usually go on some tangent, and you can write for 20 minutes.
Yeah.
That's
right.
why I was kind of thrown
So
off.
I will start
Yeah.
off this time with
Smart man.
with my number 10, which is Parappa the Rapper. I'm a big fan of Parappa. Once again, probably the game the most that I thought should have been on the classic that was not, because that is like a very simple, you don't need the analog sticks or anything. It is just a straight rhythm game, but it's innovative in a lot of ways in that, one, it's a rap game, which is not something that you really see, and you can kind of invent the music, and I don't think a lot of people know this, and I'm not entirely sure if... I always assumed the point of that game was to rap, not to repeat, and I've always gotten better scores when I freestyle the music, but to the rhythm of the music, if that makes sense. And I have literally always assumed that's how you play the game, that's how I beat the game, and I don't have much trouble when I do it that way. But when I try to play it more like a Guitar Hero, where you hit the exact things at the exact times, it's like, oh, you rapping bad, or whatever it says. But anyway, Parappa the Rapper, an awesome art style that still holds up today, an awesome character. This is kind of PlayStation's heyday with having actual mascots, which is something that I miss dearly. And I think with PS4, they've been diving, or at least trying to dive back into it. They threw like
Revive them, maybe.
They threw like Sackboy in at PS3, but like they came out hitting hard with Knack on PS4, so you know they were serious about their mascots. But we got Crash back, we got Spyro back, et cetera, et cetera. The music, it's a comedy game. It's a funny game.
It's goofy.
There's singing about going to the bathroom and how to drive a car and how to karate, all this stuff.
The three most important things in life.
Which adds this kind of quirky uniqueness to it that I really, really like. So yeah, and it plays today exactly the way it played back in the day, which is really nice. I think PlayStation 1 in particular, and 64 had that problem too. The games don't age as well, and that was something that
Controls-wise, or just...
Controls-wise, I mean, graphics-wise, they don't age as well either, but I personally get over that very easily. I can put myself in the world of a game, even if it looks like garbage, pretty easily, and I don't know if that's a unique thing to me, but I hear people complain about the graphics and the blockiness all the time, and I'm like, well, that's just how it is, and as long as it's consistent, I get into that in half an hour or whatever. But the fact that most of the games that I have on my list play just as well today as they did when they came out, that was a big thing that I looked for in my list. And Parappa, obviously, since it's a rhythm game, plays just as well as it did. So my number 10 is Parappa the Rapper. Giving that dog a point.
All right. I don't have any catchphrase, I guess, for my number 10. But usually with these lists, actually every single time, I'm pretty sure, I kind of say what the system was for me, just because there's so many systems and they all do such different things, and they're not really like PS2, PS3, there's not much of like a clone there, even though maybe some play the same games, or Xbox and Xbox One. There's not too much of the same, I guess, but they all kind of have their unique identities. Thus, that was kind of the reason why I asked for them back in the day, or bought them when I finally could. PlayStation 1 was the point for me, because that was still early enough in my life to where I finally realized, like, oh, video games are more than just like steer the ship around and shoot stuff.
I think a lot of people
this
realize
is
that
more
with
than
PlayStation.
just like the get the high score, play in the arcade, or claw machine. Like, this was more than just like a pastime. This is like, oh, okay, like I don't have to read books now for stories. I
Right.
can play games now, or I can
It
just.
fused art and narrative
Yeah.
and all that stuff, and kind of made it a medium.
So if I
that
was
can stick
this
around.
age back then, I would be like, oh man, like here's like a new like groundbreaking medium. But back then, I guess I was like, ooh, cool stuff.
Yeah.
So that's what PlayStation 1 was for me. I guess that's another reason why the list that we talked about for the reintroduction, I guess, of the PlayStation 1 is just like, they could have chose better games to make me feel that way again.
Yeah, they
Or remind
definitely
me.
did not look at how playable they are today. they didn't care about that because yikes.
Yeah. Like, I feel like I could have grabbed a better lineup of games, like going through like a collector's bin or something. Like, I could have ended up with a better list. But
For
anyways, I digress. Number 10, I guess I'm fairly outspoken against not really caring too much about this series.
This is what I think it is.
But Castlevania, Symphony of the Night. I'm not much of a Metroidvania, but if you are, my God, I'm pretty sure this is widely considered the best Castlevania.
It is.
Just unparalleled amounts of like backtracking, secrets, options that you have in the gameplay. Like, it's almost fairly endless. I know in nowadays terms that doesn't make sense because it's not like generated or anything like that, but just unimaginable amount of options and ways you can play the game. It's always mentioned when people do a best games of all times sort of top 25, top 50, sort of list. It's always there. The cool story about this game too is that when it came out, I mean, I won't say it got trashed, but like no one really hyped it up back when it came out. And
It was different. It was a different take on Castlevania.
Yeah.
Castlevania's always had, well, it started out super linear, and then they're like, let's add branching paths, and they had 2, which was kind of the open world RPG-ish style, and this sort of went back to that and perfected it and created the Metroidvania.
Yeah.
It created a genre. So that's pretty
Yeah.
important.
So it's number 10. Like I said, I don't really care much for the genre or the type of game it is, but because of its impact, that's usually what I hold my number 10 for. And like I said, there's plenty of people that prefer this genre or could easily get into it. And why not play the best one, or at least the grandfather of them all, if you're into it? So I think it's definitely worth a buy or inclusion on any best of list.
I appreciate that. My next one, my number 9, is for you, and it's Resident Evil 2.
Ooh.
Resident Evil 2, they did what a lot of people have figured out with 2s in games. I don't know what it is about movies that they can't do it correctly, and video games have mastered it, which is you take what you have, you take all your core mechanics, you expand them just a little bit, you expand the playground just a little bit, and the game is better for it. And then they're like, let's make a 3, and then they do it more, and you're like, nope, that's too much. Too far. But 2s in series seem to always be the sweet spot, and I think that's true with Resident Evil. They
In
gave you,
video game series, yeah.
in video games, yeah. They give you a city with that bigger scale. They give you characters that you care about and that you love. Leon, obviously, very, very lovable.
Yeah.
It had voice acting that wasn't the worst thing in the world, which I'm going to talk about some bad voice acting later probably. But it set the bar for survival horror and definitely for Resident Evil. Everybody obviously still compares horror games to this game, and it's getting a remake. Actually, a lot of games on the list are getting a remake or have been re-released. But anyway, it's getting its big makeover, which is super, super exciting. It had its own interesting take on backtracking, and it had like areas where they deal with your expectations of going back through past areas, changing things on you, everything like that. And Resident Evil kind of, I would say for survival horror games, probably the most replayable. Meaning I love ones that I love for the story and stuff like that, but replayable in like they give you new tools and they rearrange stuff on you on your actual second playthrough through the game, so it changes how you play as opposed to just wanting to replay the game because it was a good game.
And New Game Plus wasn't exactly the biggest thing in the world back then.
Yeah, I don't even know if that was a thing.
Those games kind of felt like they had it.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. So Resident Evil 2 hitting my 9 spot.
That almost sounded dirty.
It can hit my 9 spot.
Hitting my 9 spot. Let's talk about some racing. Crash Team Racing.
Oh, okay. I was going to say I don't want to, but you sold me.
Crash Team Racing, I think I still compare each Mario Kart that comes out to it. Obviously, by now, with as many iterations of Mario Kart versus the one, Crash Team Racing.
They kind of made another one, but it was a different team, and it wasn't good. And we don't.
Let's not talk about that.
I think it was called Nitro Kart or something.
Something like that. But the one and the only Crash Team Racing, it's hard to compare like 20 games to one, so it's not an even sort of comparison. But at least for me, I always think with each Mario Kart, with each kind of fun racer, if you want to include like the Sonics and stuff like that, and Diddy Kong and whatever other racers out there.
Nintendo, or not Nintendo, Nickelodeon.
I always think back to this game and think, a spin-off racer can work. It's not just a money grab. It's not just a silly idea. And it's not like a filler between like a main studio making a new game or anything like that. It can actually be really good and hold up decently well. My big thing with Crash Team Racing is I think still to this day it's got my favorite weapons of any kart racer.
Sure.
And they all seem like they do something, and it's not just like, oh, I can get 1 banana, 3 bananas, chain of banana, whatever. Like it's not 6 weapons but 20 different options for those. Like each one felt really kind of different, and it felt really tuned to the Crash world. Obviously, by now with Mario Kart, we get a lot of like, here's Link in the game, and here's other people. So like, it's weird to see shells coming out of Link and stuff like that. Like, but with this one, it's all self-contained. There's no like super weird characters that have never appeared in the games before.
It's a big roster of characters.
Yeah, it's a really big roster, especially once you go through the unlockables, which there's like a billion of.
Yeah.
This was, before the times of Smash games and stuff like that, where you spent like 30 hours unlocking stuff, and like
also
still
this
got
just
new
has
characters.
A cheat code that unlocks everything, so just do that.
That was the best time. Cheat codes. But no, and this had like boss races and stuff too, or boss battles, whatever you want to call them. It's just everything felt really attuned to Crash. It made me feel like I was still playing Crash. It was almost just like a mini game of like one of the main games, but it was a lot longer and detailed than like a mini game. But everything just felt so right. And when you're playing Mario Kart, you're not playing a Mario game, especially, like I said, all these other people jumping in. This just felt like a Crash game. It felt like you just kind of walked off, not really hub world, but you were in the hub of the game, and you just walk through this door, and you're racing now. Everything just felt like Crash. And that's my favorite thing about it, is that it like retained its own personality. And I really love to see them revamp it, redo it, remake it, because I know it could work. But yeah, just everything else felt right. The racing in the game, the tracks, all that stuff was just fine. But really, it was the weapons and just keeping the personality of the game, which was already pretty zany and quirky and stupid. But it like kept it very well.
Crash has good lore. I don't really think about it. I mean, I don't know if lore is the world. It's a good universe. It's got good characters and stuff.
And voice acting. Had a lot of voice acting in it, too.
Yeah.
All the same people.
I like Dr. Engine's voice.
Oh, yeah.
He sounds like a vampire. My number 8 is Devil Dice. So this is a game that I have here. For this particular game, I think that this rings true, which is some good games that we played back then aged really poorly and came out and then I think some like mediocre games ended up aging really well, and you go back to them and you're like, oh, this is like a gem that I just didn't play then because at the time it didn't seem like it was much. But now that we're so far past what the PlayStation 1 is, going back to this one, this game is awesome. So this is I think it's 5-player, if I'm not mistaken. Let me see. Is this? Yeah, it's 5 players, which is interesting. And it is a party game that is really, really good. It is a platforming puzzle party game, and basically the idea of it is there's dice all over a board, and you jump on the dice and you like spin them, and you need to make the number of dice match whatever number is facing up. So you can have 2 2s touching each other. You can get 6 6s touching each other. And once you do that, those dice disappear, and you get like the 6 dice under your name in the scoreboards. And first person to get 4 separate completed lines. So if you get the 2, the 3, the 4, and the 5, you win, or the 6 and the 1 and the 4 and the 2, whatever. The first person to get 4 completed sets wins. But you're competing with other people, so if I clear the 3s and then a minute later you clear the 3s, the 3s are gone and somebody else needs to clear them again to be able to get them. So it's kind of got that like volleyball aspect of it. And people can, like, you can be working on the 6s and then somebody else can come in and finish it off and get the credit for it. So it's got that like Mario Party, oh, don't you dare mess with what I'm doing type thing going on. It is just a blast of a puzzle game that, like I said, still holds up today. It's got that rare more than 2 players going on. Crash Team Racing did too. But it's got more than 2 players, which is something that you just didn't see that
The odd 5-player
often.
game.
Yeah, it's very, very strange. I never played it 5-player. I just remembered that from
I don't even know
seeing
5
it.
people.
That's also true. But it also has its own single-player mode. Playing against the bots is still fun. You can like do ones where you see how long you survive and things like that. Have a blast with this game. It's really, really good. Really, really underrated. Also, it's on the Japanese Classic. It has a different name, but it is this game.
Yeah, I don't think they can say devil over there.
Yeah.
Yeah, the
once
best
again,
party games are the ones that make you pissed off at everyone else around you.
Yeah, it's really, really fun. We haven't done it yet, but I would love to get, I guess, 5 of us together and play this sometimes, because I do think it is oh look, an incredibly playable masterpiece.
There you go.
That
Should have just read the back of the case.
Yeah, there you go.
Number 8, Twisted Metal 2. I guess following sort of your theme, actually, this is going to be quite a relevant theme throughout this. From now that I'm looking, number 2 games in series. The big problem that we have nowadays, whether it's a number 2 or 3, a different remake, whatever. Same thing in movies, much more so, is they add some stuff, but for like everything that they add, it's almost like 2 steps forward, 1 step back. If you're lucky in some cases. This was another example, like you mentioned Resident Evil 2, where they just took positive steps forward for the most part. I mean, even if some were like baby steps here and there, like they still didn't just like totally tank something, any real category of the game. So in my eyes, that makes it a great sequel to the first game. They added cool characters to the mix, and they brought back vehicles from the first game, but gave them new characters too. So you still, even though you got like maybe the same type of cars in the first one, it was a new character. So it meant a new story, that meant a new kind of little personality to it. So it was still a lot of new, even if they didn't change up the vehicle or anything that they had visually in the battles. Speaking of the personality of the game, it's like super campy and comic book like. So I'm always up for those as long as it's it acknowledges that it's stupid and it's not one of those like trying to be super serious sort of things. So that's what I got out of this game, where it's not really career mode, but it's story mode when you're just like in the first game, you're just battling to win to get your ultimate wish or whatever.
To get genied.
Yeah. So it was funny to see a lot of these stories play out where it seems super dark, but then it's just like, oh, this is like 90s, like DC or Marvel.
Yeah, I don't think it like actually took the dark turn until Black. Black is the one that they're like really. I mean, Sweet Tooth was still like a serial killer.
Yeah,
but and he still like hung out with Crash Bandicoot. And their mascots, but
yeah, it wasn't like super like go hide your kids type stuff until Black. So I think that game still scarred me. but no, it was super campy, super fun. The battles were cool. I really liked the levels that they added to this one. And yeah, just everything about it just seemed like a upgrade for me from the first game. And there's really not these types of games anymore. Obviously, it was like a super lethal sort of like destruction derby style game. There's really just not much of these anymore, and I'm pretty sure everyone, at least around my age, if not a little bit younger than me, like who grew up on video games, probably played it. I've always gotten a nice little smile or nod out of like mentioning Twisted Metal out loud, so it's always kind of a game that's stuck out there for some people. Whether you can play it for hours and hours and hours on end, it does get repetitive because it's just, like I said, it's just the big destruction derby sort of thing. But there's plenty of people to play through, little story arcs to see, and I don't know, it's just fun kind of mayhem. So always sticks out there for me. So that's my number 8.
I'll throw onto it the soundtrack, the licensed music. I think they got songs and everything that fit really well with the environments, and the environments were really, really cool. Especially as you start getting deeper and deeper into the game, but they also were very destructible, which is not. I mean, they had stuff like Mech Assault let you destroy buildings and stuff like that.
Yeah,
but it wasn't like the most common thing, and they would always have.
And
like,
it definitely
power ups.
changed.
The cars all had their own special, things that they could do. It was a really cool game.
A lot of variety, but
Glad to not play it on the classic.
That was one of the few destructible where it actually like changed the game at that point in time. Obviously, other games had it, but it didn't like do anything. It was just more like for effect. But yeah, when you start getting into the Battlefields type games where they pushed it, that's when it was a game changer. But yeah, Twisted Metal 2.
I don't have that much to add to this one, but my number 7 is Crash Team Racing.
Oh yeah.
I think that as far as the race, I actually disagreed with something you said. I think the racing in this game is really, really good. It's hard to compare it to like Mario Kart on Switch because they've had so long to refine it. But the fact that the PlayStation 1, Crash Team Racing, I think still mechanically, just racing mechanics beats out a lot of the Mario Karts that have been going on for so long.
It's hard to tell too because you got like peripherals and stuff with the Mario Karts now, where you didn't before.
Yeah, it's a little bit weird.
Crash.
But the fact that they still are talked about in the same sentence like constantly, like there's people who will defend Crash Team Racing as better than any Mario Kart, and I don't want to say it's better than any of them, but I think it is better than a lot of them, and it's a PlayStation 1 game. The worlds are awesome. I think the stages are fine. I think that's probably its weakest point. I do love the power-ups. I think there's cool stuff like if you're they have Aku Aku and Uka Uka, I think, and like depending on what character you are is the one that'll come as the power-up to save you. I think that's like your star type thing, your invincibility. But anyway, definitely I don't want to say that because I don't know your list. But one of the best racers on the console. Love kart racing. It is not done that much and not done well very often at all. And I think this is
once every 2-3 years at this point.
Yeah. I think this is an example of an amazing kart racer. Naughty Dog, good at everything they do. How about that?
One thing I forgot to mention too is that a lot of games, especially the newer Mario Kart games, have like coins and stuff you collect throughout. Like they don't really do. You can't tell what they do. You have to have someone go, "Oh yeah, you're faster." By the way, but in that game,
the Wampa fruits.
Yeah, the Wampa fruits. Yeah, it made you faster, all that, but you could see it sparking when you had your weapon select screen, and you knew you could tell that it would have a bigger impact, whatever the weapon was. Like it would change it or modify it somehow. So there's a lot of visual cues to help you understand this is why you kind of want to steer out of your way and collect that 10th one. And
unpopular opinion: the Wampa fruit sound, collecting Wampa fruit, that whoop that goes to the counter, more satisfying than collecting coins.
Not as annoying. People don't make it their text message notification tone. So
you hit one of those crates and it goes doo 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 doo. Oh, it's so good. It's so good. Anyway, Crash Team Racing, my number 7.
Much more preferable to eat fruit than coins too.
Is it? Give me chocolate coins.
Number 7. Getting a little tactical here. Final Fantasy Tactics. For me, who's played numerous Disgaea, Fire Emblem, all these kind of like tactical franchises or powerhouses, it's nice to be able to point to a studio more so known for outrageous JRPG experiences and say, this is one of the best ones in the whole genre, not just PS1. I didn't have to limit this to PS1 if I didn't want to, but the cool thing about it for me, as compared to Final Fantasy games, obviously it took me till 12, 15 to really enjoy a Final Fantasy because
you're a crazy person.
They're all such like lofty, big Japanese experiences that I can't really like connect with. I mean, there's human characters here and there. There's, stories that I can kind of latch on to, but they're so just big, profound, like world-ending, whatever type stuff that I can't really ever like sink my teeth into it. At least, like I said, until 15, which is still kind of out there, 12, which is still kind of out there, but it took like gameplay systems for me to hook onto it. This one, much more grounded Final Fantasy experience. Actually, a really good story. Characters that seemed relatable. You could talk to them and not just,
they aren't angsty teenagers.
Yeah, that, and they're not just like super Japanese villains. Like it felt really like medieval, I guess. So you could really just, if you had any sort of like historical perspective or interest, like you could kind of jump onto it and be like, okay, this is pretty cool. Lots of variety. Like just an absurd, really, amount of like customization you can make with your characters and going down whatever kind of pathway you wanted to as far as like team compositions and stuff like that. And it wasn't as excruciating, I guess, back then as a lot of tactical games as far as like so much time put into setup and each turn took so long. Like this one was just a 1-for-1. Like Kevin's faster than Nick, so Kevin goes first. Like it's very simple, and they didn't want to put all the thought into that. They put the focus on the characters and the story, which is really cool for a tactical game. So, honestly, probably my favorite Final Fantasy game, and it's not even a mainstay game. I still like it a little more than 12 and more than 15. So,
you like 12 more than 15?
Yeah, because it feels like KOTOR.
My number 6, Final Fantasy VII. I will take the mainstay Final Fantasy game. Obviously, the most cherished of all the Final Fantasy games.
For some reason.
Well, it's because it's the one that broke through the mainstream. It's the one that got everybody on board with Japanese systems, Japanese, turn-based, their turn-based combat. It brought everybody in. It had a story and characters that people did really, really like. It had tragedy. It was dark. It had, plot twists and things along those lines.
All it took was a white guy with a really big sword. And they finally got some Western attention.
Anyway, so it is classic. It is beloved. It's not my personal favorite Final Fantasy game or anything along those lines. They introduced, not introduced, but they had the active time battle system in there, which is sort of turn-based with some things that you needed to pay attention to so that it wasn't just, I select this, you select that, which I think is totally fine if you want to be, more Dragon Quest-y traditional turn-based. But they gave the Western audience something else to kind of latch onto in that. Giant world to explore, huge, scaled quest for... people hadn't seen something like this, especially in 3D. At the time, the cutscenes and everything blew everybody's mind. It was absolutely incredible. Still funny to go back to. And then I have to mention the amazing music in the game. I think Final Fantasy music is definitely top tier. It gets its own, symphonies and concerts and stuff. It is phenomenal. And like I said, while this is one where, the character models don't hold up very well, the boxy, clouds and stuff like that, the cutscenes are still totally watchable, and the gameplay is what this one was built on, that turn-based gameplay. So, Final Fantasy VII.
Remake coming in 10 years.
Remake maybe not coming. Did you see the news that he left the company?
Yes.
Yep. Probably not coming anytime soon.
Cool trailer, I guess, though. Number 6. You mentioned racing a second ago, so I think I'll mention racing. Gran Turismo 2. Once again, in the series of sequels that did it better than their original counterparts, this one not only doubled the amount of tracks, but quadrupled the number of cars. It offered rally racing and city tracks. And by city tracks, I mean more like Project Gotham, where you're driving through towns and not just dedicated racing tracks out in the middle of God knows where, place that you can't pronounce. But this was the other one, too. On top of adding all that detail and content for tracks and cars, also added that much more of like a meticulous level to detail for tuning your car, and you could spend upwards of like 15, 20, 30 minutes like fine-tuning your car, doing the practice, trying to get it to that top tier, and then throwing it out there and racing and getting all the trophies and unlocking all the licenses and moving up. So it became much more of a simulator. I don't know if people threw out that word quite as much before the second one came out, but very much so a simulator, like something these gearheads who are tuning cars in real life could like get into.
Right. I was always told if you know how to drive in Gran Turismo, you can drive in real life.
Yeah, I mean, just simple stuff too.
I was told that once and I remember.
But yeah, like I said, this could bring in a different type of audience with people who, may not care about the funny Italian guy jumping on stuff or the purple dragons or, whatever else. But, hey, a pretty easily controlled car game, and I can sit here and use my real life knowledge and make this thing like a supercar. Or if you just wanted to dream big and be like, I'm never going to own a Ferrari or whatever.
All the license,
but
everything in it.
But I can own one in my digital world, so I'll go for that. But yeah, just like we said with the other twos that we've thrown out there so far, just built upon the nice little foundation. I believe, too, Gran Turismo 2 might have been, as far as like number of sales, like it was way up there, way up there in the total PS1 era games, and it's just a heavy hitter in the franchise. And I think at least until the last one, like this one kept Gran Turismo at the top tier of racers.
Poor sport.
Yeah, I don't know. I won't get into it on this list, but yeah, Gran Turismo 2 at least, real good, real number 6.
Number 6? Yeah, okay, because now I'm on 5. Whew, scared me. I was like, oh no, I made a boo-boo again. Number 5, Tony Hawk Pro Skater 2. Once again, sticking with the theme of the sequels. This was, I think, the perfect balance of enough simulation and enough arcade craziness that you could, fly and put on zero gravity and do whatever you wanted. But when I used to play it as a youngin' who skateboarded, I would do, I would try to play like realistically. So I'd be like, ooh, whatever, 50-50, and then I'd land. And then I'd like skate around a little bit, and I'd be like kick flip. I like wouldn't.
Not like most people where you hear them with a controller in their hand and they hit a rail, and then they're just like
they just keep changing all their moves.
Oh my god!
Yeah, I think this is the best in the Tony Hawk series. I really do like Underground. I think Underground and 2 or at least the best 2, just because Underground was actually very innovative. But I think 2 kind of mastered what it was doing as its arcade goodness. It had the creating modes, which were so good, creating your own skater, all that stuff. It was really smart to just kind of do like a Super Mario style thing where it's like, here's the map, do whatever, you have 2 minutes, do what you want in your 2 minutes. Try to collect the letters, try to find the secret tapes, try to do, and after 2 minutes it's over, you get your score, and it gave it this replayability. The soundtrack is absolutely incredible.
Yeah.
Really, really good soundtrack.
Every song fit.
If you were an actual into skating, they had all these unlockables where you could I think you would like beat the game or whatever with a character, and you unlock their skate videos, and you could watch them do they're basically just
that was some of the best parts, was just sitting there watching those
I used to just sit there and like watch them all like a movie, and then be like, all right, I'm pumped up, I'm ready to go skate now. You put you in the mood to do that. Activision, it kind of at the height of their power, maybe not financially, but like respect wise, people loved Neversoft, Activision, all this stuff. Just a fantastic game. Like I said, it improved on the first one and added the ability to do your manuals and stuff like that. It's real good game. I think not 100% sure. One of the highest rated games on Metacritic too.
Is that the one that's 97?
It's up there.
Okay.
Yeah, it's in the top like. I don't know how it ranks after there's a tie, but I think it's in the top like 3 scores.
Oh, okay.
On Metacritic, yeah.
Quite a title too to hold on that site, because there's a lot of big name games on there. Number 5, continuing. This is like a double 2 actually. Continuing the theme of 2, Persona 2 Eternal Punishment.
Oh, that is a double 2.
Not only is it Persona 2, but it's the second half of Persona 2. The first half being Innocent Sin.
Yes.
So, not only is it an awesome addition to the Persona franchise...
Is this the first time you get to talk about this like on the podcast? I know you talked about it a little bit when you were playing it, but I don't think
Eternal Punishment? Yeah.
I don't think you've ever gotten
I think I've talked about Innocent Sin before. But
yeah.
Eternal Punishment, not only an awesome upgrade to the Persona franchise, it being number 2, so a good sequel, but also very much built upon, intentionally, story-wise, narrative, character, all of that, gameplay-wise, built upon the first Persona 2, or the first half of this mini-series. The game really serves as a endpoint for what I'm going to call the Persona trilogy, which is 1, the first half of 2, and 2.5, which would be this one, Eternal Punishment. It also features my favorite protagonist out of whole series.
Joker?
No. Joker's in the game, but not what you're thinking. And no, not you. Maya. The true one and only female protagonist of a Persona game that counts for anything.
That's it for this episode.
No, just really cool story. Like I said, built upon everything that they did in Innocent Sin, which was the first half. They took that end, which I won't talk about spoiler-wise, but they set a nice endpoint where even the director of the game himself said, we want to approach this game now from a different perspective. So not really like you were talking about with Resident Evil 2, where you can have like a Claire half and a Leon half. It's not the same game from someone else's eyes. It's like continuing on and then kind of changing things up. So it's really weird, like in a time sort of sense, how this happens. Makes sense in the game. Hard to explain, though. Like I said, just everything. Even the soundtrack, too. A lot of continuations of songs from the first game, sort of remixes, and some where you can hear the original one in sort of like the background, or you can tell that they just kind of layered over that with this game. So a lot of continuations, a lot of new stuff, and a lot of returning characters, which is not something that Persona games now, at least, are really known for. They're all separate titles.
Yes.
Same kind of world. You might get little nods here and there, maybe a handful in your game, or some like super secret Easter eggs. But this one very much, like I said, this made it feel like 1, 2, and 2.5 were like a trilogy. So that was really cool how they ended up doing stuff like that, and awesome game.
My number 4?
Sounds right.
I hope you're proud of me on this one, Nick.
Uh-oh.
So my number 4 is Mega Man X4. So I had an interesting internal debate with this one because Mega Man X4, one of my favorite Mega Mans, I actually did put it a little bit lower on my list than I originally had it ranked after I went back and played it again recently in the collection. Definitely my favorite like pixel art game on the PlayStation 1. I think it's phenomenal, but my internal debate was this. We're not allowed to have more than one from a franchise, but Mega Man has the Mega Man X series, the Mega Man Legend series, and the Mega Man series all on PlayStation. There's Mega Man 8, there's Mega Man Legends, Legends 2, X4, X5, X6, all on this one console.
What you're saying is there's way too many Mega Man games.
With that said, I made the decision to only put one game with Mega Man in the title.
Okay.
So no Legends, even though I probably would have Legends low on this list. No 8, even though I would have 8 quite a bit higher on the list. I went with X4. I think if you could only get one game with Mega Man in the title, that's the one to get. Mega Man X4 has, like I said, it's my favorite X game. I like it better than any of the other X games. It stuck to the formula of X through X3, but it just updated it without adding gimmicks to it. The only thing that they added, well, it's a big thing, but the thing that they added is the ability to play as Zero, which is something that they have in the other games, but you can just play the game from start to finish as Zero. You get a different story. You get a different like angle on the story.
Like Zero.
Yeah, but the cool thing is, and it's something that I've almost never seen, the game is, minus like the weapons you get and stuff, the game is exactly the same as X or as Zero, and it works. There's no like, man, if I was playing as Zero, like the game wasn't made for Zero and then you can just play as X, which is the problem they had in the future ones. And the game wasn't made for X and you could just play as Zero. The game was made to be played as either character, and with no changes to any of the level design or the boss patterns or anything, it plays perfect as either. Like if you removed one of them, you would never know that the game could have been played that way. And that is huge. Like there's not too many games you can say, like sometimes there's games where you pick another character and it'll like add platforms because the one's worse at jumping or anything like that. Like not in this game. It is totally perfect as either character, which is kind of insane. It added anime cutscenes to the story. It's the only one with actual anime cutscenes. Bad voice acting.
Oh yeah,
very bad voice acting. Love it. It's fantastic. It's a relic of its time. But it had the biggest budget of any of these X games. Like I said, it's my favorite in the X series, and it's my favorite Mega Man on the console, and it is the one that gets my vote. So the 4 slot goes to Mega Man X4.
Now let's wash that bad taste out of your mouth with some Tony Hawk Pro Skater 2. Not sure why they ended up changing the name to Pro Skater 2, but I like it from the original. Of all the things you mentioned, I think the biggest one was Create-A-Skater. I know Create-A-Park was cool. Like, it was nice that it was there, but when you compared it to all the super secrets and all the Easter eggs and all the crazy stuff, you could never replicate that with your stage. But it was cool that it was there. I never really messed with it too much. But Create-A-Skater, though.
Fun fact, I never posted it because I lost the video. I try to record so many things for this channel. Stuff breaks. I have dozens and dozens of hours of footage that's just gone or whatever. I did once. I filmed a video, and it was one of those things where like it was kind of like a reaction, so I can't do it again. I went through all my old Tony Hawk games, and I went to all my old stages that I made and like and played as characters that I made just to sit in that nostalgia. It was a fun time. It was fun. I had a creative imagination. I was like, I'm going to make my school. It was like nothing like it. I was like, good job, Kevin. But anyway, that's
you were severely limited, too, in your options. Yes. It was a pioneer of its time, sure. But no, the, I guess, career mode or whatever you want to call it with your Create-A-Skater, really awesome. It was nice that you earned money in the game and you could put that towards points and beefing your character out as far as like the cool stuff he could wear and have on him. And like I said, when you're building up stats too, that makes it little more RPG-ish, so it kind of worked for this game because it wasn't too over the top or too overbearing, and I mean, you got money left and right in the game, really, once you figure out how to play it. Favorite part about this, too, is that, yeah, it was super replayable, but it was super fast to replay. You didn't have to sit through, like, 5 minutes or, like, go all the way back through the menus and then select it again. Like, it was real, just, like, snappy. That's what we talk about with Fortnites of the world and the Call of Duties, is that once you're done, you can just hit a button and you're almost, like, instantly right back into it. Yeah. It was almost like, with the music playing, like it almost didn't skip a beat. Like you didn't really like have to wait 3 minutes or anything. It was just keep going, just like the music. All that music just kept pushing you forward because there's real high pace, right? High energy. Let's just keep skating, boys. Even though it had Create a Skater, it still featured the best skater out of the entire Tony Hawk.
I was sad I didn't mention it. I'm glad you're going to.
It was a pain in the ass to unlock, but the best skater in Tony Hawk franchise history, Spider-Man.
I agree.
Such a cool, like, if you think about it, even when you look at it right now, it was like, damn, how did they pull that off? Because obviously your board's flipping through the air.
Dude, he does that, like, kick flip where he kicks it and then catches it between his legs and pulls it. Oh, it's so good.
Because I think that was right around the same time that they released Spider-Man 2000, so I think that was the purpose of putting him in there. But, man, what a welcome addition to that game. I remember flipping out as a kid and just being like, Spider-Man's in the game. I love Spider-Man. So it was real sweet to see him in there. It's real cool to think about him now. What if they made a Tony Hawk and put PS4 Spider-Man from this year? And
they don't need to make another Tony Hawk. They tried that.
They tried. And they tried. Also, one of the biggest, like gameplay-wise, if you really sit down and think about it, one of the biggest gameplay things that they added in this game, you kind of mentioned it right at the end of yours, manuals. Mm-hmm. Like, how do you... I can't imagine what the score differences were between the first game and then taking that super sweet thing you just did and that super sweet thing you did like 10 seconds later and chain them. Like, and that's when you would start getting like the million scores and just like absurd amounts. Because I remember going into the second game just being like, yeah, I'm pretty good at the first one. Then it's like the lowest request or is like score 500,000. You're like, what? Like I had to get like 3,000 in the last game. What's the difference? And then like you learn manuals and you're just like, I can like chain one combo through the entire 3-minute run. Yeah, almost.
It's also worth mentioning that Tony Hawk 1 had great levels. Yeah, and they remastered the good levels into this one. Mm-hmm. I think I know like the warehouse or whatever. I think the school was also a Tony Hawk 1 level, and so like they brought back what was great, which is nice.
And kind of a common theme throughout at least a lot of them like major games, I guess, on the system, like Easter eggs and just finding hidden areas, which really isn't a thing anymore. Easter eggs are sure, but like finding hidden areas is kind of like a ancient kind of feel for a lot of games now. Not many games really have it. I mean, there's things like hidden trophies, and like I said, there's Easter eggs, but it's like, you know, knock that wall down. Oh, you get this whole new area, or jump over this. Hey, there's UFOs. Like, you know, just like weird and wacky stuff. I think
it was like if you grind all the helicopter blades, the helicopter would like take off.
Oh, the hangar area?
Yeah, it would like break through the thing and there's a whole nother area you can skate
in.
Yeah,
just weird stuff like, and it was always cool to like just kind of happenstance stumble upon it, but it was really cool too when your friend with like the gaming magazine was like, oh yeah, check this out. And it's like, oh, that's awesome. Like I had no clue that existed. And so lots of like just little gems hidden all over the game. And it was just really nice to have all of that beef, or all that content on top of just a simple skating game. So that's why it is way, 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 way up there in terms of Metacritic. I'm glad people back then realized the kind of like groundbreaking stuff that they were doing. But yeah, aside from Underground, which I would consider a different franchise for them because they took a completely different like approach, I guess, to the games.
Yeah, and they made direct sequels to that series.
Easily the best Tony Hawk Pro Skater game.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Most well-rounded, at least.
Number 3. We're getting to it.
Mm-hmm.
Little gem. This one's actually on the classic. and it is named Metal Gear Solid.
Tell me more.
So this one, I think, is the biggest and the strongest example of what you were talking about in the very beginning, which is games as a medium, not just a game.
Like a storytelling medium.
It is. It is not a board game anymore. It is not, a card game, like something just to pass the time.
It's not Galaga reskinned over and over.
Right. It is an actual storytelling medium that has characters and plot and depth and emotion and all that stuff. And Metal Gear was one of the first games to really get that point across. Obviously, it was smart in being a stealth game, because I think that is, I don't want to say easy. I don't want to say anything's easy. But, that is a genre that is deliberately slow. So it was able to do these, more cinematic, tense moments. It was, kind of able to use that to its advantage. It had Kojima behind it, which is the master of the medium, really. I think he's one of the best 3 people in the industry at doing things that this wouldn't work as a movie, this wouldn't work as a book, this wouldn't work as an anime. This could only work as a video game, and he uses that to his advantage with his, his lovable characters and his villains especially. And oh my gosh, the music is super iconic. I think that's a big thing. And I think that's something that's been lost in more recent games, just because music used to be really catchy in older, the more you go back, catchy music from the Castlevanias or the Marios or, almost any of the Crash Bandicoots. I can hum you the theme songs or, tell you the music for most of these games. But then as we get to more modern games, there are games that have great, amazing music, but it's usually more amazing because it's just good music. It doesn't have anything to do
more
with
like orchestral pieces that are 6 minutes long. You're like, oh, that was a thrill ride.
It's more of a powerful thing than this is catchy, memorable.
But a lot of these games, whether it's Nintendo or PlayStation, at this time, they gave you a minute and a half time slot, and they were like, we're going to make you remember this over the symphonic.
And you do.
Yeah.
And you do.
Yeah.
But anyway, just the first great example of merging gameplay and story, which is something I always talk about, that I love about games. Either give me this gameplay story hybrid that's amazing, or just do a Mega Man X4, focus completely on the gameplay and give me an amazing thing in the stories. Whatever. When you dance in between is where I have a problem. This, I think, is its time example of being that perfect craftsmanship of that. So Metal Gear hitting the number 3 slot.
Time for number 3, which this is my only non-number 2 game, if we're talking about sequels at least. Street Fighter Alpha 3. I know we haven't done genre lists. We were kind of toying with that maybe in the future, so I won't say anything to that extent in case people with long memories ever watch those videos. But as far as Street Fighter games go, I know not really up your alley. You can stand them for the most part. Some. So I guess I'll take over here. But
you do.
Alpha 3 was... It's a main game, but Street Fighter's weird. A lot of Capcom stuff is weird as far as what is a proverbial main series game and what's kind of a spinoff. When they went down the Alpha series, or the Alpha path, I guess, they focused a lot more on what are some cool tools that we can put in the game that we haven't added to 1 and 2. And what are some cool animations? What are some cool art styles that we can kind of pursue that haven't really held up with how we've done games before? And this one, the Alpha series, is much more bright, vivid. I won't say comic book but the game just pops more, and it's got more of an artsy feel to it. It's got more of an urban type thing. You can see that with games like Third Strike. All kind of around this era were just what are some cool urban, you can really feel 90s vibes from these types of games, even though these were 2000s. So that's kind of the route that they took with it, and I really appreciated that. A lot of people, it it was received very well as far as the public, I guess, was concerned. Had a really cool mechanic, I guess, in this game. All fighting games, usually introduce a new mechanic. If not, then they kind of tank or get forgotten about real quickly. This game introduced the isms, and by isms, I mean like each character had 3 different options that you could pick. It was an ism. So basically, each fighter had 3 different variations of them, because all of these isms change basically the supers and the special moves for the characters. And that can completely and sometimes drastically change the way that these characters are perceived and play, and like how you defend against them. When I say, oh, Kevin picked this one, but oh, he picked this variation, like, now I got to think a little bit. So it was really cool that they added that.
Kevin didn't pick anything.
No, he never played it. This game. Game added a world tour mode, which, if you kind of think about it like Tony Hawk, they gave you a character, all of the stats, all of the isms, like taken down to 0, and you played all the way through and built up your moves or built up your power, stuff like that too. So that was a really cool addition that Street Fighter never has really been known for, even since, really, to have kind of a weird single-player style game that takes you completely out of the just pick your character, learn it, fight sort of thing. So another cool nod, I guess, to this is that a lot of the Street Fighter V characters that are out now and the ones that came through DLC and other means, I guess, have come from Alpha 3. So they are understanding now that, hey, Street Fighter V, a little bit more, like I said, art style wise, they took a different path than they did with 4 and 3 and 2 and everything since. But it seems to kind of mesh well with Alpha. And not only did they kind of recognize, hey, these series kind of complement one another, they started carrying some characters over too. So that's the cool thing about having 30 games in your franchise, is that you can pluck little fan favorites here and there, add a couple new ones, add some classic, and you got a full game. So it's really cool to see characters from this game. One of my favorite Street Fighters, I think one of the best fighters. No series really inclusive there, but it's cool to see that kind of making its way back into modern games. And yeah, number 3, Street Fighter Alpha 3.
Number 2, little game called Crash Bandicoot 2, Wrath of Cortex. Crash Bandicoot 2, my favorite Crash Bandicoot, still to this day. I think that this series perfectly explains how I feel about that whole trilogy thing, where 1 was great, but like, oh, its checkpoints are horrible, and it is, too hard, and, all this stuff. They figured it all out with 2.
Yeah.
They made it borderline perfect. The length is perfect. If you want more challenge, you can try and get like the relics, and if you're a crazy person, you can go for the gold relics and the gems and all this stuff. So they have that, like, you can just run through it, or you can thoroughly try to beat it, all that stuff. I think that Crash feels the best in this one. I think in Warped, they go a little bit overboard. They start giving him too many moves, too many power-ups, all this stuff, which is fun if you're like a speedrunner or something, because you can cheat all the levels. But like, I don't need a bazooka. It's cool. I'm totally fine.
I've never said those words in my life.
This one also didn't go overboard with the vehicle sections. It had like the jetpack and stuff. They were in there, but they were few and far between. It wasn't every other level. I'm basically just telling you why 2 is better than 3, because that's a big debate. Some people like 3 better, some people like 2 better. I have always been of the mind that 2 is better, and going back and replaying them, 2 is absolutely better. I don't know what your next game is, but 2 is absolutely better. It added the huge mechanic, which is the slide, which was similar to Mega Man 3, where in Mega Man 2 he could only jump and shoot. In this, Crash could only spin and jump. they add the slide and it adds so much. It adds mobility. It adds the ability to, you know, get away or be aggressive. It's an attack at the same time as being, you know, a speed run tool where you can slide everywhere. It complements your jump. You can kind of do like a jump, a slide, jump, spin, get some distance. They just, it's just perfect. It's so good. Not to mention, they have Jin in there, who I was talking about earlier. Tiny, the Komodo brothers, all that stuff. Real good boss battles. Real good level layout and structure with the, you know, here's 5, you can choose from the 5, and then you go fight your boss, you know, instead of doing kind of like the Crash Bandicoot 1, like Mario 3 style map that they sort of did. They gave you like a little hub to run around and do stuff. Coco.
Oh, yeah.
Gotta mention Coco. But anyway, Crash Bandicoot 2 is my number.
You could have just said Coco for number 2. I would have accepted it. Number 2, usually a little outspoken against some games in this series. Not outspoken against the first game in the series, Metal Gear Solid. I talked about it on the top of the episode. You reminded me that I said it, and I'm going to say it a third time. One of the first games that blurred that line between movie, like drama television show. There really weren't that many back then, but nowadays we have the NCISs, the 24s, the whatever. That there's cop shows all over the place, but we never really had too many shows like this. But it blurred that line between like I can take this stuff for real now, and it's not just me playing on my Game Boy or something like that. Video games, like this, you can put this out in front of someone and be like, this is an actual like narrative. This is a cool thriller or like a spy kind of story, and people would pretty much have to take you seriously. So that was really cool that we can always kind of point back at certain games for being like this introduced, like Castlevania. Metroidvania would not exist without that game. Probably never would have happened if they didn't kind of take that risk and kind of change the way that their game played. I think even Rainbow Six, the original one, came out before Metal Gear Solid, but I don't know if we would have that kind of militaristic, I don't want to say Cold War, but like everything's on the line, the super nuclear threat or robotic, I guess in this case, threat exists, and like you got to stop it. How are we going to do it? Like, I don't think those games would have blown up quite as much if Metal Gear hadn't existed. Who knows if we'd even care about stuff like Call of Duty, honestly, if that didn't kind of strike its chord where it hit.
If this game didn't exist, gaming would be totally different. Yeah. For sure.
And it was nice to have Kojima because he kind of came into it with the, I don't know how true it is, but he kind of had that vibe, like, I don't really care if people don't think it's like cute and fun and awesome. Like, I just want to make what I want to make. And like you kind of alluded to as well, he couldn't, make a huge budget movie with this. Like, he couldn't go sign actor of the day to play, the starring role. So he made it in a video game, and I think it worked perfectly as far as like the villains and the characters and all of that. And just that moment to moment, like, your phone can ring at any time and you have that conversation. Like, it's very, it would be hard to latch onto that with a movie. And even a TV show, like, that would eat up so much time of an episode or, a season or something. But for a video game, it makes sense because it gives you nice breaks between the tension of crawling through here or walking past these enemies or whatever. And obviously, so many iconic, like, noises, alerts,
ringtones,
notifications. Yeah, all of that stem from this game. And, obviously have been adopted into further stuff, too. Voice acting, you mentioned it too. A lot of games had voice acting, really, but they didn't like really push it as a narrative. It was just, let's just give the thing a voice, or maybe the mascot had a voice or made like noises or something. But and like maybe villains had corny, campy sort of lines. But like this one, if it had that like half-assed or kind of secondhand dialogue, it wouldn't have worked.
If this had Mega Man X4's voice acting, this game would not be even remotely
or
loved.
if the villains just had some like wacky Japanese like super villain sort of like it just wouldn't work. There's some monologues there a little. You can tell where the game was made, but yeah, like it didn't go campy. It went serious, and it really tried to be taken seriously. I guess on the main stage, and it worked. And obviously, it, like I already said, it paved the way for not just stealth games, because I mean, there's still really like only a handful of franchises that even try it, like just true stealth games. But like I said, like you can probably trace origins of the Tom Clancy series, which led into Call of Duties, which led into Battlefields, which led into all this stuff. Like who knows what would have got that ball rolling if they didn't kind of take this chance to make a cinematic style game. So, number 2.
Number 1, the moment of truth. A surprise to everybody, I am sure. My number 1 is Nick.
I'm number 1?
Yeah. What's my number 1?
I don't know.
Really?
Yeah.
Yeah, you do.
No clue.
It's Silent Hill. Silent Hill, the horror game I shouldn't say that, but so this is all about atmosphere. It's all about sound. It's all about immersion and this eerie dreading. It's not what's in front of you. It's what might be around the corner or what feels like is around the corner. And 95% of the time, the answer is nothing. Mm-hmm. And that is kind of the power of the series as a whole. It wasn't cheesy or campy in any way. It had really dark themes and really dark, situations and scenarios. But it was subtle about everything. You had to go looking for some story beats and things like that. It was a very immersive experience. It had an amazing soundtrack that I still listen to. It's like this soundtrack is more like the soundtracks of today. I feel like it was that far. It is, beautiful violins and piano and all this stuff, which is, more kind of the orchestra type things that we were talking about earlier that you get today. But this had that, a long time ago. Very simple story of just, you're looking for your daughter after a car crash. But it's interesting because it has a male lead who is not a badass, which is not very common. Usually, especially in horror, when they want to make you kind of feel weak and vulnerable, they make you a girl. That's just how it works. And I think that works well most of the time.
Especially like the Asian survival horrors. Yeah. Like typically, I guess the boilerplate model is you're a high school girl and you're like this tall and you're tiny and frail.
Yeah, and that's always their excuse. Like, oh, you don't know how to use a weapon, or you can't hit things with the pipe very hard and stuff like that. And that's all fine. But this is unique in that they made you a guy who is weak and defenseless, who's just looking for, his daughter, and he's not this cop or this, strong dude. He's just a dude.
He's not Resident Evil 5 Chris Redfield.
Yeah, which is cool. Like, that's just not very common for the genre. I think this game uses tank controls kind of the best. It has amazing camera angles still to this day. If you just go back and watch it, and if you watch the movie's camera angles were ripped straight from the game, and that's why they're so effective with all their angles. It uses tank control super well, so you hit a direction and you go that direction, and then when the camera changes, as long as you're still holding that direction, you keep going that way. So it creates the cinematic experience as long as you can wrap your brain around that. I know people nowadays have trouble with tank controls, but once you get your head around it, it's not that hard. And they give you options, so you have strafing, you have actual combat options if you choose to, try. But they also don't rub it in your face. They're not like, hey, this is how you fight. Yeah. Like, the first time I played the game, shooting a gun took a little. I was like, okay, so you need to ready the gun, and you need to shoot, and you need to manually reload the gun. they give you all these systems so that when you are surrounded, when there is a monster that actually shows up, it's not like I got this. Like you're still constantly thinking about your next move or about how you like if you can escape, if you can fight it. They have very limited health and things like that. It has multiple endings. It has side stories and quests that you can do that actually give you better or worse endings depending on what's going on. It has different boss battles depending on different paths and things that you take. And yeah, it's just a really, really phenomenal survival horror game. I still play it probably once a year. I go through it, and every once in a while I turn it on and just do the intro because I think that all you need to do is play the first 15 minutes of the game, and you're like, okay, I get why this is, so amazing. I will say the voice acting not the best. It not even credited. People aren't 100% sure who voiced Harry. Like, it's like a debate. There's articles about they think they found the guy who voiced him and all this stuff. It's crazy. Like, that
just
that
walked around and was like, hey, say some stuff for me.
That, like, wasn't a thing back then. People didn't, like, think of that as acting. You know what I mean? Now it's such a big deal. But anyway, yeah. Definitely my favorite PlayStation game. My favorite PlayStation 1, like, survival horror game. And I think it still holds up today, as long as you can get your head around tank controls, which you should be able to do. But
tank controls a lot like driving manual shift cars. Like, if you just kind of jump into it now after years of doing it, you're going to tear your transmission up and be real mad. But if you kind of introduced it alongside maybe like driver's ed or something like that and like kind of picked it up early on in your driving career, much like your gaming career, not so bad. And you can kind of like look back at it and appreciate it, and now be glad that there's cover shooters and like a flowing camera or third person or whatever.
Right.
So
yeah, but there's just so much about this game. The puzzles are, I think, just enough. They're like that perfect thing where you can figure it out without looking it up. They'll give you like a poem or whatever you need to analyze and like you can figure it out, or you can look it up and be satisfied. It's not like some of the ones like later in the series or whatever where it's like I would have never figured that out. Like I think it's got a really good balance of that. The enemies are all linked with the scenario, so like it's not just zombies. There's the gray children who haunt the school, and like they all fit. It is a game about themes. That is the theme of the game, is this themes. And they pull it off masterfully. So Silent Hill, my number one.
Probably easy to guess my number one if you've ever paid attention to anything. Sticking with the spooky, scary theme, at least back in the day when I could tout myself as a survival horror fan, not so much anymore. Resident Evil 2, little game that they're remaking next year. It's going to be Game of the Year 2019. Just forecasting that for all you people out there who are not watching this, I guess, this most recent Monday, which will be airing. So many things to say, and I'll try to limit myself while you do maths. Like you mentioned, alternating perspectives, and basically the game sets it up very believably and very well at the beginning. You're driving in a car, some big crash boom happens, you get out. Obviously, you can't get on the same side of a car, and there's path left or path A, and there's path B. And you can choose to either be Claire or Leon. Claire kind of links you to the first game. Leon is like the new kind of, I won't call him a mascot because that's a weird word to use with a survival. Yeah. But
I have that problem with Uncharted and people being like Drake. I'm like, that's weird.
But for all intents and purposes of the Resident Evil series, if you want to get someone's attention and you want them to buy your game, you probably put Leon in it in some way, shape, or form. He is, for no better phrase, he is the mascot of the Resident Evil series. So the game is awesome in the fact that, once again, it's a number 2, just like most of the sequels on our list anyway. But I think and like this won't ever be a genre, I guess. But as far as sequels go, this might be my favorite sequel of all time. Definitely top 2, because there's another one I think about but won't mention. Definitely, it's weird to get a second game in a long line of games and call it kind of the foundation or the legacy game that changed the game. Obviously, Castlevania is kind of like that too, where it wasn't the first Castlevania, but now you think of Castlevania or you think of games similar to it, anything like that was the pinnacle point. So for Resident Evil series, this was the pinnacle. Plenty of praise for 1, but they just added so much. They expanded the story from 1, which was going through basically a mansion, and they took you into an entire city. And I'm pretty sure you can look at just about any Resident Evil game since then, and there is some mention, there's some tied to. Half the games have Raccoon City in the title, but everything usually ends up pointing back to Raccoon City, which is the premise for this one. It was really cool that, you get sort of the old classic story of the cop going in on his first day and everything goes to hell, and you get sort of along the same lines as you were talking about with Silent Hill, not needing a real badass character. It's just someone looking for, in this case, her brother, but just looking for a family member. Just very simple stuff you can believe in. Like I said, the cop thing is more of like a tried and true thing that can always kind of hook people, and there's the empathy path, of, I guess, of looking for a lost loved one. It's really cool in the fact that you mentioned it too, where if I play through part A of Claire's story and then I play part A of Leon's story, it's like 90% the same. A lot of similarities, the same encounters for the most part. But the cool thing is that maybe Claire gets the big badass gun, whereas Leon gets maybe more bullets, or he gets a more a weapon that makes more sense. He doesn't necessarily get the grenade launchers and the big badass weapons, and that even helps make up for the fact that, once again in Japanese fashion, you get the thin set girl and the rookie cop who can shoot and stuff like that. So it kind of helps make up that gap. A cool thing too with this story is that not only you get introduced to new types of enemies like the Lickers, which probably terrified anyone, at least of my age range, when they first played that. Just real gross, real nasty enemy types that you weren't used to after playing the first game. But they also had, they finally introduced, these, what I would just call, hulking badass characters, where, you normally have, one doorway you can get through in these types of games because they want you to, make you feel kind of closed in and like your escape routes are minimal, like any survival horror game would, and you just have this, huge, 400-pound, 7-foot-tall thing swiping at you and not chasing you in, a really fast sort of method, but just, slow, lumbering, just, a threat that just won't go away.
Yeah, and inevitability.
And like you sort of mentioned with the soundtrack of Silent Hill, this game also just put you on edge even when, you just shot 3 guys in a hallway and you're walking down it, but now this music is kicking up a little bit and you're like, oh God, what's around the corner? That's probably the best place to be in survival horror, is when everything is up in your head.
Right. Yeah. I will say, not to compare Silent Hill and Resident Evil too much, because I'm trying to keep these things separately for this, but not using music, also very effective.
Yeah.
You walk in and there's no music.
Yeah.
That's not good.
Especially because there's plenty of points in games where, if you think about walking into an area and here's ammo boxes just stacked up, some health over here, here comes a boss fight. That's what you think of when the music goes away, is what's about to jump out at me, because it's not so much Silent Hill games or Resident Evil games or any of the survival horrors. It's not so much what just jumps out and scares you, like a jump scare. Same thing with horror movies too. No one really cares about jump scares, but it's just when it's all in your head and when you start thinking okay, I'm going to be safe here, and then you're not, or oh man, I'm terrified, this sucks, my life's over, and then it's just an empty room, or maybe it's a save room, I guess in this game's case, that you walk into, you're like, oh, whew, And then the thing gets you. Like, that's when it just makes you a nervous wreck for the most part. Obviously, this type of horror, different from more psychological and mental. Obviously, the zombies are fairly the same speed throughout. You can always kind of see the threat or hear the threat. That's the cool thing about the fixed camera angles of the games of this period, is that a lot of times you hear like the zombie noise, but you can't see it, and you're like, oh god, like, am I going to turn this corner? Is there going to be 7, 1, 0? Are they going to crash through the window? Is it a dog this time? God, like there's just so many things that go in your head, and you spend 30 seconds walking down just a straight hallway, whereas most games you're just holding sprint and you just go straight through. Like, there's no thought into it. So that's the best part about these games. I think this game nailed it for me. Like I said, not only a great sequel, but probably one of the best sequels of any game, almost any medium. Like you mentioned, 2s don't really do so well in the box office as far as reception. And it was just cool that this kind of defined Resident Evil. You can see a lot of traits even in 4, that even though 4 is known as the game that branched off yet again and went down, they focus more on the action part. A nice thing about this game, too, is that along with the tank controls and stuff like that, I've seen a few people complain about the number of options you have. You're in a police station. Obviously, there's guns everywhere. There's ammo. But it strikes a nice balance between feeling like you have enough, but not like, okay, I just cleared this like chapter and I've still got 300 bullets left. And especially once you ramped up the difficulty, made it even worse. But it was just really cool in the fact that if you played it right, you had enough to just survive through
I was
the
just
game.
about to say, it gives you enough that if you didn't finish the game, you feel overpowered. But if you use all that early on, you're going to run out.
Yeah.
Like, they don't keep doing that.
Yeah.
So it is a balance. Like, at first, you're like, this is ridiculous. I can just mow everything down, until you can't because you used all your ammo mowing everything down.
Really cool bosses, like I said, not just the zombies, but some other big surprises, which I would say it's a spoiler, but since the game's old, it makes me not say that. But they're going to return.
Since it's coming out in
they're going to return here in a
months.
couple of months. I'm not going to mention them. Even with the trailers, some people who've played this original game go, oh no, don't go down that hallway. Like, that's still cool that they don't even have to show it. It might not even be there in this version. They could
don't think it will.
They could just put it somewhere else and just be like, ha, 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 you were scared for nothing, and then it shows up. Like, so it's just really cool to see the different iterations, and now that we're 20 plus years out from its original release, seeing what that's done since, and kind of the ideas that they've had cooking since then to remake it and make it a whole new game. On top of the last little thing I'll mention, it's nice to go from Claire A, Leon A, Claire B, Leon B. It's cool that they give you some options sometimes, in the fact that one, I'm pretty sure it's pretty notorious at least, like you walk into a locker and there's like a big ammo cartridge, there's grenades and there's stuff like that, and you can choose, do you want to take none of them? Do you want to take one of them? Do you want to take all of it? And then the next person that walks through, that thing's gone, or those things are gone, or it's still sitting there, kind of depending on your choices. So you have to think like ahead, like, oh, okay, I'm playing this as Leon. I'm pretty good right now as far as ammo goes. Maybe I don't need this, but what's Claire's going to be like? Am I going to jump up the difficulty? So am I going to want that extra ammo? Like, there's a lot of thought that goes in between, like I said, New Game Plus that didn't really exist back then. It was nice to have even that thought thrown into the mix, whereas normal games, it's not even a concept back then. So really good. Lots of great things to say about it, and I can't wait for the new one to come out, because I hope that looking at this game through 1998 eyes, much different than 2018 eyes. So I can't wait to see if it can kind of recapture some of those same feelings, even though the game looks completely different, plays completely different, might just be completely different with some nods here and there, but we'll see.
All right. So I tallied it up. We had even 10 games, so we're good.
Really?
The games that got just missed it are depressing that they're not going to be on the list. But then I look at the list and I'm like, oh, that's a good list, so I can't complain too much. Before I go over it, because we do have tiebreakers to break, even though it broke to 10, I just want to say, I didn't have Symphony of the Night on my list, which is obviously a big one. Spyro, which I thought for sure you had my back.
Oh, you thought I was going to fill in?
You betrayed me. Yeah, a Spyro. I just couldn't do it. Medieval, obviously a game I love. The remaster, I couldn't put that on my list, unfortunately. That would probably be my 11. Tekken 3 specifically.
That's still, even with 7 out, 3 still considered probably the best one. So
yeah, that's not true, but sure.
So I said consider.
But anyway, I just wanted to throw out a couple of those because this system surprisingly amazing.
Yeah,
really, really good games. It's almost like they could make a classic system and put all of those games on it, or just
not,
or just 18 of different games and 2 of the ones that we wanted. That being said, we had from the list, I think Final Fantasy VII and Metal Gear Solid were the only ones that are on the actual classic list, which isn't very surprising. But
so 2 was correct.
Yeah. So here's our tiebreakers. So the first one, it can go either way. It doesn't really matter that much. But Final Fantasy VII versus Gran Turismo 2. Do you have
both will survive?
Both are fine. Yeah.
It's a weird thing because fans would be like Final Fantasy VII,
right? Which is why I
raw numbers would be like Gran Turismo 2. But I'll say Final Fantasy VII. No one sitting around going, man, when are they going to remake that Gran Turismo 2? So
yeah.
Plus, there's been better Gran Turismos out.
The other one, which I feel like I know your opinion on, but it is Resident Evil 2 versus Tony Hawk Pro Skater 2. And this one, for me, is actually pretty tough. I obviously had Tony Hawk higher on my list than I had Resident Evil, and Tony Hawk would be my choice. But it's a tough one.
I would say, since Resident Evil has been a bit rockier than Tony Hawk.
Has it?
Yeah, I think so.
I don't know. There was that Project 8, and that you got to ride from Tony Hawk ride on this peripheral, and it was pretty bad.
Man, I blocked that out of my memory.
It's pretty bad.
I don't know. I put Resident Evil as number 1, so I'm also a bad. You put yours as higher, I put mine as higher.
I know, that's what I'm saying. And it doesn't matter. They're both making it.
Yeah.
It doesn't. It's just a matter.
Both had a historical impact as far as games that came after it. I would say Resident Evil just because it's a PS1 game, and this was on all sorts of stuff.
Okay.
Resident Evil 2 eventually came out.
It was on Dreamcast and
it eventually came out on other stuff.
Okay.
But
fine, I'm sold. Whatever.
I'm just pulling stuff out of my rear end for explanations.
All right. So that completes the list. You ready?
Ready.
All right. Top 10 PlayStation 1 games. We have number 10, Gran Turismo 2. Number 9, Final Fantasy VII. Number 8, Persona 2, Eternal Punishment. Number 7, Crash Team Racing. Number 6, Mega Man X4. Number 5, Street Fighter Alpha 3. Number 4, Silent Hill. Number 3, Tony Hawk Pro Skater 2. Number 2, Resident Evil 2. And number 1, Metal Gear Solid.
That's a nice variety.
That is a Metal Gear Solid list right there. That's real good.
I hate that pun, but yeah.
the 11-12 slot was Crash Bandicoot 2 and Final Fantasy Tactics. So good games, just missing it. I'm totally content with that list though. As I normally am, I've been very happy with all of our lists. I think that this is a very good way to do this type of thing. Minus your horrible opinions on the PlayStation 3 list, I've been very content with everything.
PS3, least favorite.
Minus that one.
Yeah, in this one you have the full JRPG, you have full racing, you've got fun racing, you've got whatever category you want to throw Persona 2 in. RPG. Mega Man, which is, typical platformer, typical fighter with Street Fighter. a spooky, scary game with Silent Hill, and like I can defend myself scary game, Resident Evil 2. Different sort of monsters and feel with those games. Tony Hawk Pro Skater, which is
arcade goodness,
pure ridiculousness, and then Metal Gear,
and then the flagship of the system with Metal Gear, which is impressive.
The one that made it to the actual list that matters, I guess.
Yeah, that's true. At least they got that. That's about it. Anything else you want to say about the PS1, PlayStation 1 days? Anything?
No, I wish I could get interested in the classic, I guess. But
what if a question, if it is hackable and you're able to put every PS1 game on it, do you care?
Not so, like I said, like owning all these systems when I did, I think I'm like at peace with it moving on.
Yeah.
Except for original Xbox. I wish it was back because the Xbox One sucks. But
I hope they do an Xbox Classic. That would be cool.
But no, I mean like memory card wise, function of the machine wise, controller wise, I don't really miss anything from that. And a lot of these games, Metal Gears are still made, Resident Evils are still made.
They're still made, and minus Metal Gear, like they're being remastered. They remastered Tony Hawk 2. They remastered Resident Evil 2. I guess they didn't. Silent Hill's the other one. That's the one that I really wish was on the classic. They did a reimagining of it, but I don't count that.
They tried to make a
your crashes and your Spyros. What? Shut up. Your crashes and your Spyros and everything.
Yeah,
Final
like,
Fantasy 7.
Like these games are still being made. So there's, like I said, with Dreamcast was a nice like, man, where's my Jet Set games? Where's my all these different styles? And we get all the fighters from arcades. So like, there's a few things that I miss from Dreamcast. There's a few things I miss from like N64 and all these other lists that we've done. This one, it's nice to look at because, like, holy shit, like, look at just the history, even with the ones that we didn't mention, like Castlevania, they didn't make the list. Like, so much, like, history and precedent on that list that it's just like, that's a nice list.
Yeah, it is. PlayStation 1 to me, I keep bringing up the classic. I'm going to wait for that and see if it is hackable. If not, I might start maybe I'll start with this list. Like, I want to start getting games for that system because it was the system that solidified myself as a gamer. I think, like, obviously I loved and played my NES all the time, and, I played my N64 all the time and all that stuff. But, like, the PlayStation 1 was my personal it wasn't my brother's that I was playing on or a family system. It was mine. It was in my room. And obviously renting video games was a much bigger thing then. So I've played a lot of games, but I don't own a lot of them because it was, here's $5, I get this for a week. Swap it out, here's another $5, I get this one for a week. So I didn't actually own a lot of the games. And I'd be excited to go back and do that. PlayStation 1, great console.
Now, if they made a classic of this, they had all the rights and all that crap that they can't get.
Dude, if they could get the rights to Tony Hawk Pro Skater 2 on the cloud, oh my gosh.
Like,
it's like a nightmare.
We could make millions off this bad boy. I could retire.
But that is it for this episode of the Press X Podcast. Thank you so much for being here, Nick. And thank you guys so much for watching. We will speak with you next time.